Hello, my name is Daniela Saioni and I'm a proud member of IAtsy Local 873 in Toronto, Canada. But as always, the opinions I'm expressing in this talk are completely my own. I mean, let's face it, if I had a crew with me, I'd have much better hair, makeup, wardrobe, sound, lighting, camera operating, and everything else. I'm here today to say that I'm 52 years old and I'm a veteran script supervisor who's been active in the film and TV business for over 30 years, and I love my job. Like many other industry veterans, I have been privileged to make movies with some of the best talent in the world, and I have personally done so on multiple continents in 11 countries. Today I'm coming to you from Rome to sing the praises of the 8 to 10 hour shoot day. And there's really no better place in the world for me to do that. You see, I first shot in Italy in 1997, about 6 years into my career. And it is here that I first experienced this way of making movies that I had not seen up to that point. In this and several other European countries, the 8 to 10 hour shoot day has been the standard for decades. And over the next 10 years in my career, I experienced this phenomenon again and again in France, Ireland, Malta, and the UK. Now, I'm not saying that every production in every EU nation works this way, but in multiple countries here, it's the rule and not the exception. So let me backtrack for a second. For those not in the film business, 50 hours a week still sounds like a long week, right? But you may or may not be aware that film crews in North America typically work a minimum of 12 hours a day and anywhere up to and including 24 hours a day. Who among my film workers watching have clocked a 24-hour day multiple times in their career? Now, we do this at least 5 days a week while in production, plus wrapping our gear or our notes for another hour or so, plus lunch, plus travel to and from set. Talk to any film worker about the amount of sleep we get, and especially on a show that's really pushing it with the hours, you will often hear some shocking things like 3 to 6 hours a night. And some of us are operating heavy equipment. The work weeks get even longer for film workers in places like India and most of Asia, in certain Eastern Bloc countries, and in Nollywood. In North America, it is considered normal for film workers to clock 70 to 90 hours or more every week during production, sometimes even more depending on what department you're in. And that is not including the time it takes to get home. And the amount of time we get in between work days, called turnaround time, is obviously tied to the amount of sleep we get. And it's one of the conditions that IAtsy workers are fighting to improve right now. When I began in this business in union television, the nature of our work days was a total shock to my system, even as a healthy 20-something. I did not come from a film family, so I was completely unprepared for the long work days. When I hit my first 13th hour, I was really confused. I actually turned to the focus puller and said, are they allowed to keep us on the clock this long? He said, oh yes, welcome to triple time, where we get paid 3 times as much to be 1/3 as efficient. Other crewmates would say things to me back then like, suck it up, we get paid to take abuse. I was so naive as to think we actually got paid for our specialized knowledge and skill sets. I would ask some of my coworkers how on earth they got their sleep, and someone would respond, we'll sleep when we're dead. Spoiler alert, some of the people who said that to me are dead now. And as I settled into accepting our work days as normal, whenever I'd hit somewhere around the 17-hour mark on set, I would go into that special kind of delirium where I'd fantasize about the sweet release of death just so I could lie down. Not only are our work days long, but our shifts change constantly, so that while we might start at 7 a.m. on a Monday, by the Friday, we could very well be starting our day at 6 p.m., which makes for a very short weekend and a very confused circadian rhythm. By the time I hit age 24, I had a full-on cortisol belly, and I've not seen my waistline ever since. In many European countries, because many of them have no unions at all, I have seen crews simply put down their tools at the 10-hour mark and walk away. They love their jobs too. They love cinema, but they also love their quality of life. The 8 to 10 hour workday is not true for all EU nations or even all shows, but it still remains the case for most. And I've seen this play out over and over again. 8 to 10 hours plus 1 hour lunch are the rule and not the exception. And in France and Italy specifically, we sat down for a full hour of lunch, having the food served to the crew at the tables while we sat down. Unheard of most anywhere else, right? When I worked in France, mealtimes had to be scheduled at specific times relating to when we would normally eat breakfast or lunch or dinner, regardless of what your call time was. In Canada, we take our first meal break 6 hours after we start work, even if that means taking lunch at 1 a.m. While working in Europe on big American shows, I saw production conform to the local standards without issue because when in Rome, people went home to their loved ones, got their sleep, and the movies still got made, and got made well. But the fact is that we do know how to make great movies on 8 to 10 hour shoot days in North America as well. We all know about the legendary veteran directors who work this way: Sidney Lumet, Ron Howard, Clint Eastwood, and I personally got to work with two great advocates of the 8 to 10 hour shoot day. Thank you, Bruce Beresford, for all the stellar 8-hour shoot days. I think we went 10 hours on one day on his entire movie, and he was mortified. And thank you, Paul Feig, for all the super productive 10-hour work days where you made sure we made a great film and had a joyful set and still got home in time for happy hour. Well, Paul shoots in Europe all the time, so he knows the drill. But it's not only veteran directors who know how to deliver an 8 to 10 hour shoot day, they just have the clout to insist on it. There's a fairly long list of female directors who rose up from the indie world on micro budgets, or who were pigeonholed into working with children for so many years that they had to be able to make their days in 8 to 10 hours. And they brought that skill with them when larger opportunities presented themselves. But it's not only veteran directors and women who rose up through the indies who know how to do this either. Filming during COVID forced many directors and crews across all experience levels to adapt to the 8 to 10 hour shoot day, and guess what? For the most part, everyone stepped up and the films got made, and they got made well. Shooting during COVID taught many of us that we could work 8 to 10 hour shoot days. Now, imagine repeating that as a way of life without wearing all that PPE. Why? Why was this suddenly possible on a wider scale on North American soil? Because producers had leeway to adjust the schedules accordingly to accommodate the needs of COVID. They were given the mandate by some studios and networks to stick to shorter shooting days for the sake of health and safety, and so more days were added to the schedule. And unless you live and die for that triple time check, I have to say it was a great feeling to go home with the sun still up. For reduced work days to work on an ongoing basis, directors and crews need producers to have their back and make it possible to have longer schedules. And producers need the studios and networks to shift to this mindset. And agents need to negotiate actors' availabilities on a scale that is reasonable, so crews of 200 people or more are not forced to upend their lives and health to shoot 16 hours a day to accommodate one actor's schedule. Look, I know full well that despite all the health and social issues, there are still many film workers who don't want 8 to 10 hour days. We're sometimes our own worst enemies that way. But hear me out. I honestly don't think those kinds of productions will ever go away, not anytime soon. But with the hindsight of 30 years, I am not leaving this industry without fighting for a future where days longer than 12 hours become the exception and not the rule for film workers. Why? There are many great reasons for choosing shorter work days and a longer shoot schedule, not the least of which is that it's much harder to be productive, let alone creative, while working more than 50 hours a week. And the fact is, although this is a business, it is still a creative industry. This is not just a theory, it's been documented along with other studies on the various risks to our physical and mental health when we surpass 50 hours a week. I'll post a link to an article with a CDC document outlining some of the studies done on workers in industries with long hours below this video. Some of the key takeaways from that article include: working more than 10 hours a day is associated with a 60% jump in cardiovascular issues. Working more than 40 hours a week is associated with increased alcohol consumption, unhealthy weight gain, and depression. Over 60 hours a week, and the risk of injury increases by 23%. Relationship issues accelerate and families break down. I don't know what the official number is among film workers, but I'm divorced and nearly everyone I know is. Raise your hand if you're a film worker and you're divorced. Bonus points if it's mainly because you were never home. There are also some film workers who wear our long days like a badge of honor as proof of their dedication to cinema and television. To them I say, It's okay to love your job and also to love your family, your health, and your life, and not be forced to choose between them. It is really possible. Choose between my life and my job because I work long days? Oh, stop being so dramatic, Daniela. I'm going to tell you something that's been bothering me for many years now. A rumor, a piece of hearsay that came to me at the age of 25. I was on the e-board for a Canadian film union at the time, and our friends were setting up their own local in another province, and they asked about the high cost of life insurance. And allegedly, the insurance adjuster let it slip that it was high because the average age of death for film workers was 54. Again, complete hearsay, but that number haunted me more and more over the years. Now, that was a shock to me at the time, but in my mid-20s, that still seemed like a long way away. At 52 now, not so much. That number came back to haunt me in my 30s when I had my first cancer scare on a show where there were 3 women well under the age of 50 on one crew who had cancer diagnoses at the same time while we wrapped. Well, I never did find out if that number was real. All I knew is that with each passing year, I saw more and more of my still young crewmates drop dead. And I wondered if, as only the insurance adjusters would know since they calculate lifespan by industry, I wondered if those deaths were tied to our lifestyle at work. If there are any insurance adjusters watching this right now, maybe you can put your thoughts in the comments. So here I am on holiday in Italy, and I'm thinking about the rest of my life, however long that may be, and that alleged number is gnawing at me. Well, you know how script supervisors love to break things down and analyze them. I looked at the only publicly available data I had access to. I began to go through our in memoriam list for my union local. It's a list of members who've passed away since our local was founded in 1958, and it includes their name, department, date of birth, and date of death. Now, I don't believe it includes everyone, but it's probably a decent enough sample size reflecting Toronto specifically. Well, first of all, I want to say hallelujah. That rumor was wrong. Well, at least it didn't reflect conditions in Toronto. By taking all the ages of death in our obituaries list, the average age of death is actually 58. Still shocking, I know, but not 54. But then again, this is in no way the kind of detailed study that an insurance adjuster would make to reach their conclusions either. Now, in Canada, we do enjoy a higher overall life expectancy than the US for so many reasons. So if that number was real at the time, it might have reflected US locals or film workers internationally. I mean, who knows? Who knows if it was even real? I started to wonder, did the number I came up with, 58, even mean anything at all for film workers outside our Toronto sample group of 249 people? It turns out that Sister Kerri Coombs in Vancouver Local 891 conducted her own study based on their local's obituaries 2 years ago, and she found that the average age of death for film workers in her Vancouver sample was 59. This is by no means a scientific study. If we had data from every local and all the other unions and organizations who represent film workers in all aspects of production, that would be a far more legitimate number to go by. But we don't have that information, at least not publicly. Now we've done this informally in 2 locals, and a sobering pattern is already emerging. It would be incredibly useful to know if the shorter workdays in certain other nations impacts the life expectancy of film workers. Only by having that kind of data would we really begin to get a clear picture of what lack of sleep and longer workdays is really costing us. Maybe the insurance adjusters internationally can help us out on this one. Life expectancy is based on year of birth, so the actual life expectancy number for Canadians was done using a formula on Kerri's spreadsheet that, based on these 2 samples of data, revealed film workers' lifespans are shorter than the average Canadian lifespan by about 7 to 8 years. Now, I did it a little differently. I looked up the life expectancy for a Canadian born in 1962 because they'd be turning 59 this year. And it's 71.37 years, to put it into a different context. Sister Coombs plugged in the Toronto numbers into her master spreadsheet, which I'll also share below this video, and she's willing to accept data from any film workers with data to share. But I contextualized my findings on the Toronto sample in a slightly different way. Even before I arrived at the number 58, I really wanted to know what percentage of our membership who passed away never got to celebrate their 60th birthday. And that number was 51%. I wanted to know if there were differences by department, and there were. And while Sister Coombs' spreadsheet breaks down the average life expectancy by department, I looked at it another way. I wanted to know what departments those who died young were coming from. On my list of Toronto crewmates who never saw their 60th birthday, 20% came from one department: transport. In some other locals, including Vancouver, transport is in a separate local covered by Teamsters, but in our local, we are all together. I think this is significant because transport work the longest hours. They're the first in and the last out. Now, the good news for transport is that if they make it over the hump of 60, they enjoy one of the longer overall lifespans in our local, age 62. The second highest percentage of early deaths in one department, 16% according to this sample, was craft services. Now in Toronto 873, craft services does not refer to food service. It is a labor category where the members work in different departments as needed. So it is a good cross-sectional representation of the union. 14% of early deaths are in the electric department and 12% in prop sets and greens. SFX workers who blow things up for a living only accounted for 5% of early deaths, though their lifespan on the data sheet is somehow still the lowest at age 53. Maybe it's because there were fewer of them in the sample size. Congratulations to the members of the boom department who had no early deaths at all in this survey and who enjoy the longest lifespan at age 73. But I bet your back hurts the whole time. Makeup and sound were the other two departments least likely to die young according to this sample in our local, and it was consistent with the findings in the Vancouver survey. Okay, this is by no means a scientific study in any way, but it might be a wake-up call or at least food for thought. Are long hours and shifted workdays killing us slowly? We don't know the cause of death for all the members who died young. That information would be helpful. So we don't know how directly or indirectly the conditions in our industry played a role in their early deaths. The deaths we do know about include terminal illnesses like cancer, heart attack and stroke, workplace accidents, accidents at home, substance abuse, and for far too many, suicide. And there are those who would actually argue that substance abuse does not count. Well, I think that depends. Was the film worker taking stimulants just to make it through a 16-hour workday? Or were they on a bender from the depression of not having a quality time at home for weeks on end? Some feel that suicide should not be counted, despite studies that show a causal link between long hours and depression. Look, mental health is a huge issue for us as film workers, and not having the quality time with our loved ones or the chance to maybe even ever meet our loved one in the first place wreaks havoc on our personal lives. And should deadly accidents around the house or on the drive home even be considered industry related? I think that depends on how exhausted one was at the time. And sure, some of us might be genetically predisposed to certain illnesses, but consider how our longer workdays compromise our immune system and put us on a faster track to getting there. Whether or not you personally feel certain ways of dying have nothing to do with our industry, either directly or indirectly, and whether or not you believe that working over 12 hours a day has no serious impact on your health, the fact is that too many of the people I came up through this industry with are dead now. And I think about them sometimes. I think about the joy with which they came to work every day. I think about the talent and dedication that they brought to their work. I think about their snarky remarks about sleep and what they taught me about this business. I think of the people I personally trained and mentored who are on this list of dead before 60. I think about their families and loved ones who no longer have them around. And I think about how this could be any one of us, and how I hope we all live to see our 60th birthday. I've put together an end credit roll of the 129 souls I know of in my research in just one Toronto film local who died before age 60, as an acknowledgement of the fact that they gave most of their lives to this business. If seeing their names is too upsetting, please skip this next part. It is not my intention to cause any pain to anyone's lives, just to honor these film workers, no matter how they met their end. If watching 5.5 minutes of credits in silence is too hard, may I suggest playing Cyndi Lauper's rendition of There's No Business Like Show Business and following that up with the last 1.5 minutes of Ethel Merman singing it out in that movie's finale. Whether or not you agree with an 8 to 10 hour workday, I hope we can all agree that many things need to change about the way we work and the way we live. Let's do everything we can to take care of each other and ourselves. Solidarity forever.